This presentation, titled How to Conduct an Effective Environmental Site Inspection, comes to us from Melike DeGregorio. Mel is the owner of Green Up Academy and Green Up Consultants. She's an internationally accredited third-party lead auditor by Exemplar Global for ISO 14001, ISO 45001, OSAS, RC 14001, and environmental health and safety regulatory compliance audits. Mel has 18 years of experience in the EHS and manufacturing world. In addition to her role as a consultant, lead auditor, and lead facilitator at GreenUp, she was a corporate EHS manager for a Tyco International division, air pollution control engineer at the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, and production resource environmental coordinator at Frito-Lay. And with that, take it away, Mel.
Thank you, Mike. Hello, everybody. It's so exciting to be here. I have a bunch of stuff to share with you today. But before that, I want to tell you about my company real quick. So Green Up Consultants is an environmental health and safety auditing company that was established in 2008. This is when I decided to cross to the dark side and become a consultant. So most of our services are mainly environmental health and safety regulatory compliance audits, EHS management system, internal audits, or client-specific audits if you want us to go to audit some of your suppliers, vendors, etc., things like that. We also have a Green Up Academy, which is our training division. So Green Up Academy is solely focused on EHS training, and it was established in 2016. Some of our trainings that we offer, mainly environmental regulatory training, again, EHS management systems, we have ISO, internal auditor trainings, and we also do customized on-site training for your workforce or management or whatever you might possibly need. So let's talk about our agenda real quick. So I will go over learning objectives. I will talk about environmental programs before I go over the site inspection, external grounds, internal grounds, and we're going to do 3 different site inspections today. So altogether, let's see how that's going to turn out. And I want to share some resources for you that you can use if you wanted to go get some more information in certain areas. So our objectives today are 1, how to improve the efficiency of your site inspections, and 2, to share some best management practices. Just a quick disclaimer before we move forward. These slides are not a substitute for the actual text of the mentioned regulations, and this presentation is not meant to be a legal advice in any way. And this presentation is based on the Green Up Academy's interpretation of these regulations. To obtain the most up-to-date information regarding an environmental regulation, please consult with your attorney or legal department. Okay, so before I go over environmental programs, especially when you do a ISO 14001 audit, it's really important to do a proper site inspection. Of course, each auditor is different too, and everybody chooses to do it differently, and that's perfectly fine. What has worked for me for quite a few years, and some of my colleagues also, is that to start out with the site inspection, because especially in a manufacturing environment, the real world kind of happens on the production floor, right? So all the observations, how the employees are working, the operational controls in place, talking with the employees, all those good stuff give you a good start in terms of what audit trails to follow, what to review, things like that. Okay, having said that, let's talk about environmental programs. We can divide them into these categories: air quality, water quality, which includes stormwater and industrial discharge, solid waste, which includes hazardous and universal, spill prevention, mainly SPCC plans, spill prevention control and countermeasure plans, and Emergency Community Right to Know Act, EPCRA, which includes the different types of chemical reporting in the U.S. Throughout the year, based on the chemicals and their quantities that you have at your site and what you do with them. Okay, so I always enjoy starting with the external ground store. I mean, it's a preference, and preferably, I'm not sent to Wisconsin in the middle of winter or Arizona in the middle of August, but who knows? My luck, I guess. Okay. I always go to do a perimeter tour around the facility. Start from one spot and then complete back to that spot. So we're going to try to look at it like per each environmental program when we do the tour now. Okay. So in terms of air, when you do the external ground tour, look at the stacks. If there are stacks, what comes out of those stacks, right? Whatever is going to come out of it, what equipment are those stacks attached to? And hence, that's going to identify whether or not they need an air permit. If they need an air permit, then what operational controls they have in place and how are they monitoring it, measuring it, how are they communicating and training their people regarding those permits, things like that. So there's a bunch of stuff that you can just you can go with. Check out the roof. Believe it or not, it's really easy to find some exciting stuff on the roof. Who knows? Contractors might have worked and left their chemicals in the HVAC unit cage, for example. I promise I witnessed it. I don't think I could be able to make this up, So check out those HVAC units and see what's going on over there. Air permits required areas. Look at the fugitive emissions. If the doors, the gates are open, and if like a heavy cloud of dust is coming out so excitingly outside of the facility, you might want to further investigate what the heck is going on over here, right? And check the walls of the building for any kind of any pipes, any exhaust that come out of it, to see, and then ask, what comes out of this? Is it in most cases, sometimes they know, sometimes they don't, but I would recommend to kind of follow up in terms of what comes out of on the other side of the wall there. In terms of water for external grounds, so look at the materials that are stored outside. What are they storing? And it's really useful to know their stormwater status, whether they have a stormwater permit, a stormwater plan, or no exposure certification. If they have no exposure certification for stormwater, that means they cannot keep anything uncovered in their external grounds that might potentially be mobilized during a storm event and pollute the United States waters, right? So then look at the trash dumpsters. Are they uncovered? If they're uncovered, that will be a problem. And also, whatever you look at, if they don't have if they have a permit, not necessarily no exposure, that doesn't, the permit is not there to give them the permission to pollute, right? So then you would check the permit requirements in terms of the stormwater permit plan, because each permit would require to have a plan, and then see if they're following their own best practices that were identified in the plan, etc. So check the stormwater catch basins, whether they're combined or separate, or when I say combined, I'm talking about whether they go to a municipal facility, sewer treatment facility. If they do, then it may not be necessarily a problem unless, preferably, hopefully they're not pouring down oil down the drain. But if they're separate, that means they're going to go to a water body. Check how clean they are, whether there's debris or oil sheen, and follow up. So also speak with the guys or gals that work closely with the external grounds. I remember talking with one of the forklift operators, and I was asking, so what do you do with your forklift? And this facility had no exposure certification, so nothing can be exposed to this outside. I asked him, I said, what do you do with your forklift? Like, say, if there's a hydraulic leak or something. He said he was so excited. I never forget that. He said, oh, I immediately take it outside to make sure that inside stays clean. Of course, he can't do that. It's just against their against the regulations. So the environmental person who was my guide almost had a heart attack right next to me. But anyways, he meant well, I guess. And so look at whether or not there's any industrial activity nearby. Any oil loading, unloading, how are they doing it? Look at the roof drainage. What comes out of it? if you're lucky, it's going to rain while you're doing the site tour. So you can see all the exciting stuff that comes out when when the rain appears. Try to observe loading, unloading activities. And if there's any unauthorized discharge, check the walls of the building and check the outside of maintenance shop, boiler room. There's always some exciting things coming out of those rooms, usually, in my experience. In terms of wastewater, if they have a permit, consider taking a look at and just sample a couple of the conditions to see, how they're monitoring, measuring it, or how they're complying with it. And there could be, sometimes there are issues at the entrance and exits of the wastewater treatment facilities. Check for leaks, and you can they might have some checklists already in place to look at the permit required areas. So you might want to take a look at those. In terms of hazardous and universal waste, at some facilities, the waste storage areas are outside. So look at those areas. If they're covered, if the containers are in good condition, are they covered, those containers, and labeled properly? So the access, whether can anybody access to these places, or is it only say the maintenance people or environmental manager, etc. Check the leaks and contaminations. And another area which is very important, and almost pretty much 99.9% of the time that will, where you will find a problem, is the contractor work areas. Whether they forget or they don't follow, or for whatever reason, there's always something going on at the contractor work area. So take a look at those areas. Make sure everything is in good shape. In terms of spill prevention, check the oil storage areas, the containment level. When you load, unload the oil there, ask, even if the activity is not being done at that time, consider asking, how is it done? When you're doing it, is there is this activity happening near a storm drain? Is there a risk of potential oil spill in case something goes wrong, or are they covering that stormwater drain with something before they do that? Things like that. Interview employees for sure. That gives you that gives you the best information. Again, labeling of the oil storage containers, the access, leaks, and contamination, and check the soil nearby those areas. Sometimes that's a giveaway also. If you see dark soaked soil in the near vicinity, then potentially there could be a leak, and you might want to further ask what's going on in this area. So the transformers, whether they belong to the facility or to the utility company, doesn't matter. In most cases, they could be really old, and even though they could be double walled or anything, but still they could be leaking. So look at the near vicinity soil, again, how it looks. We did talk about the loading and unloading areas already. Okay, so this was the external grounds. Now, internal grounds, again, we're going to follow the same environmental program one by one. So inside now, when you look at air, check out the boilers. Do they have boilers, ovens, furnaces? What fuel are they using? The BTU rating in terms of, whether or not they have air permits. If they do have a air permit, are they following what they're supposed to do in terms of monitoring and measurement? How are they doing it? Things like that. And again, talk with the operators over there to make sure they understand what they're doing and they're trained properly, things like that. And how do they demonstrate compliance? So spending a good amount of time during site tour actually brings a lot of insight, and it makes, I think, whatever the purpose of this inspection is, whether it's an ISO 14001 audit, compliance audit, or whatever it is, it just makes life much easier on the auditor in terms of understanding what's really going on the floor, So in terms of water, stormwater, so look at the areas. Sometimes some buildings where like you would see the storm drains right outside of the door. So like I had a client, for example, like this, they have an oil storage area inside, and it's well maintained, it's all good, but God forbid if something happens, one of those barrels is broken or something happens, that oil is gonna drain right outside, and literally like the storm drain is right outside of the door, so the oil is gonna drain right there. I did write them up for several reasons for that, as much as I possibly could, but throughout the years but that oil storage area has not changed location, unfortunately, and they do not have a disastrous problem either, thankfully, but it's still a good idea to make sure that you keep the oil storage away from storm drains. So that might help you to kind of implement better best management practices for your facility, also doing effective site inspections. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to interview people, especially the ones that are working mainly outside. We talked about forklift maintenance operations, and see if any water or wastewater being discharged outside of the facility. For some reason, in my experience, the maintenance departments are so excited to discharge the boiler blowdown or compressor condensate outside of the facility. Well, you can't do that because it's gonna, include certain amount of oil in it, so you cannot discharge oil containing wastewater outside of your facility. So look at what's coming out of the facility. Okay. Okay, another thing, floor drains. Check out the floor drains throughout the facility. Where do they go? Especially if they're doing certain washing, or again, depending on what kind of chemical or what kind of oil is stored or nearby, they're supposed to know and protect those drains depending on where they lead to, right? And do they have a wastewater discharge from if they go down to the sewer? Sometimes, and again, and not sometimes, in most cases, people clean up the facility and then they just dump it down the drain. Oh, it goes to the sewer. Well, and depending on what you're making at that facility, the municipal authority might not necessarily want that wastewater. So you might need a permit for that wastewater. So you just gotta make sure that everything is in good shape. In terms of hazardous waste, so there's usually, in my experience, in most cases, there's always something going on with hazardous waste storage and satellite accumulation areas. Satellite accumulation areas is where the waste is generated. It's kind of to make life easier on people rather than carrying it to the storage area. You're kind of, you have a little bit relaxed requirements. You would still have to label it properly, but you have like 3 days to move the excess of a 55-gallon for regular hazardous waste, I guess. Again, universal waste storage areas, the labeling, condition of the containers. And another problem, it could be the compatibility of the contents of the container with the container itself. So you want to make sure whatever is in the container is adequate for that container. And it's when you do your internal ground tour, you can either follow the production flow, starting from receiving and, the raw materials are arrived and you've just followed the, however the production is going to go to, or you can just start from one corner and just try to cover as much as possible, basically. If you're going to follow the production flow, then for each production line, you might want to consider the waste generated by each process, whether it's hazardous or not, and if it is, then how is it disposed of, things to that sort. If there are proper spill kits in the near vicinity, that's really important too. For universal waste, with universal waste, either it's like a mom and pop shop or a gigantic global corporation, there's, for some reason, always a problem. And interestingly, universal waste, in my opinion, among all other environmental regulations, are the most the least complex regulations per se. It's pretty clear. but who knows? Maybe that's why it's overlooked, I guess. So check out the universal waste storage areas. Condition again of the containers. Again, they have to be covered. And again, just to remind you, universal waste is lamps, discarded pesticides, mercury-containing equipment, and batteries. And a new universal waste stream has been added this February to the federal streams, which is aerosol cans. So the containers have to be covered, and the label has to say in a certain manner. It has to say, for example, batteries, universal waste batteries, or used batteries. The accumulation begin time, you have only a year to discard the universal, to get rid of it. You look at the employee knowledge, see if they know how to manage the universal waste storage area. One thing about, I'm sure you see green tipped light bulbs around. So there is a misconception out there saying that if it's green tipped light bulb, then good, it's fine, we can just throw it in trash. Well, not necessarily. When it's green tipped, that means, sure, the mercury level is below than what it would be normally. However, it doesn't make it any less hazardous, especially if in a hazardous waste identification test, which is called TCLIP test, TCLP test, if it's not going to pass that test, if it's the level of mercury, then it's still going to be considered hazardous waste, and it has to be managed as universal waste. So unless you have something in writing saying that this green tipped light bulb mercury level is below the threshold that would make it a hazardous waste, then you cannot put them in trash. Plus, it's not a good practice to put this in trash either way. So consider recycling, even that was the case. Spill prevention. Look at the secondary containment for oil storage containers. They're supposed to be in a secondary container that could take the volume of that container. Whether or not there is a spill prevention control or countermeasure plan in place, the same way stormwater protection plan, pollution prevention plan, and check the requirements. In so many cases, I would look at those plans and I would see that, okay, they're just there, but they have nothing to do with the existing conditions of the facility. And it's just there. So that will be a problem. Whenever an environmental authority comes to your site, they're going to look at those plans, and even the auditors. If there's an SPCC or SWPPP plan, we're going to look at them to see whether or not those are followed. The nearest doors. It's a good idea to check in what's going in and out of those doors. It's mostly overlooked. People forget looking at those things. Per EPGRA, Emergency Planning Community Right to Know Act, Tier 2 and TRI reporting. These are two chemical reportings. Tier 2 is due in March 1st of each year to cover the year before. The TRI is due on July 1st to cover the year before. So look at the chemical storage. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail of these reports what they require, but the chemical storage, hopefully there's a good chemical inventory in place where you can check that the proper reporting is done. How are they using the chemical use? Observe the employees using them. Is the proper PPE used, and are they cleaning their PPE properly? Maintenance shops. Maintenance shops are my favorite places because there's always some exciting action going on, and maintenance people are the best people to ask questions because they pretty much know anything and everything to be known about a facility. And they're the ones who get really smart and creative too, and come up with some resourceful situations where it may not be the best idea sometimes. So you might want to check those areas closely. Also, laboratories, whether it's quality labs or research and development labs or other kind of labs, even pilot production labs too. There's always some excitement going on under the cabinets, whether the satellite hazardous waste is not stored properly, or sometimes there are chemical expire that they don't want to use anymore, but they're not labeled properly to be discarded in the right way. So you want to look at those things, because I did witness on a couple occasions the people from Environmental Protection Agency and state environmental agencies, the first thing they do, they came and did an inspection actually when I was at a client, and first thing they did, they just went to the labs and they started opening the cabinets under the counters, like one by one, and there were some excitements, I gotta tell you. Janitor closets. People have tendency to hide chemicals in the janitor closets that are not supposed to be there. Nobody knows about it. Somebody came up with it. So you might want to look at there. Electric forklifts. If you see electric forklifts at a site, that's fine. But then you should ask then whether or not they're reporting tier 2 for sulfuric acid in those lead acid batteries, because if it exceeds the threshold, the reporting threshold of 500 pounds, then it's reportable. So people forget that, one of the most overlooked areas. And of course, the processes, what are they using during, what kind of chemical are they using, and things to that sort for TRI reporting. Okay, so most common issues and findings I come across. Trash containers with chemicals or hazardous waste. Well, that's a violation. You cannot put hazardous waste in trash, regular trash. We see that often. So that would lead me to think either, the proper training was not provided to the employees, or the training was not effective, or was not conducted at all, or something else, whatever that is. But I see that quite often. Missing labels from hazardous waste, universal waste, and other things. Or the label is there, but it's not adequate label. Whether it's the accumulation begin date, the first time you discard a material into that container is missing. You're supposed to have that because if it's a hazardous waste, based on what kind of hazardous waste generator you are, you can only keep the hazardous waste on site for a certain amount of time. So hence, you have to put when you started accumulating that waste. If it's a universal waste, you got to get rid of it within the year. So that's why, again, it's important to put it there. Or wrong wording, like universal waste, for example. It's very specific to regulation. Like if it's a lamp, for example, you have to label it as universal waste lamps, or used lamps. There is no other option. It's one of the three. Pretty simple. But no, you would go look at the container, it says light bulbs. I'm like, no, that's wrong. It's a violation technically. You don't like the regulation? I get it. But it's on, and it's the current regulation, so you have to follow it, right? Or I would say uncovered containers, which is not right. It has to be covered. Again, inadequate containers. The compatibility of the what's in the container is important. That the container is made for that kind of content. Okay, so I want to share some key items that I think are very important for a site inspection. First of all, you got to make sure that the site inspection is thorough, corner to corner, like I said, and again, it could be a time issue, I understand, but then, you don't have to always finish the site at right away. So you can always divide it into different time zones too. So try to not to leave any area unchecked. I mentioned cabinets, closets, unattended areas, and the mezzanine levels of the facilities. People have a tendency to kind of throw stuff over there, whether it's accessible or not. You could find some exciting stuff over there too. We talked about observing employees' work, talk with them. Different types of questions are going to reveal. Hopefully, they're not going to give a heart attack to the environmental manager that's following you around, saying things they're not supposed to, but oh well. Observe operations, loading, unloading activities. And, if it's an internal inspection, of course, it's always a good idea to involve other departments too. And involving leadership team in these inspections is really important. So that kind of engages them. And it shows the people that they care. So they're demonstrating that they're not just talking, but they're actually walking the talk, which is always great. And it's important to have effective training on inspections. You can't just send someone out there, tell them to inspect without giving them the proper tools and knowledge, right? Well, it happens, unfortunately, more than I would like to see. All right, now let's do our teamworks, our inspections. So the first one, we're gonna inspect for universal waste. Okay, so the important things to remember is that the wording, right? It's universal waste lamps, batteries, whatever, waste lamps or used lamps. The accumulation begin date has to be on the label. The containers have to be covered. Let's check out what we have now. There we go. Some smashed lamps we see here. Uncovered container, no label, nothing. Violation for sure. This is a quite frequent sight that I would see, actually. See, these are long lamps, and they would tell me, well, there is no place to put them. Well, you're going to have to come up with something then. Either you can use the box that they came in, because they came in something, right? Either you hang on to that box or I don't know, however you're going to do, but you cannot just leave them uncovered like this. So it has to be covered and properly labeled, no label. Here's another one, the same thing, not covered or no label. See, I told you, unexpected areas. They just put some lamps over here, which is, oh well, they're just hanging out there. But and these are discarded lamps. Obviously, you cannot have them like that. Here's another one, open container and no label, nothing. Another violation. This is a trash can, and you can see the two lamps here. So you cannot just throw them in trash. The reason it's called universal waste is because it's actually recyclable hazardous waste. So the reason they call it universal because it's common streams to many of the industries out there. So it kind of, if it wasn't universal waste, it would have to be managed as hazardous waste. So the idea was the burden to reduce that burden of hazardous waste requirements. They said, okay, manage it as universal waste, but don't just go and put it in trash. That's not acceptable, right? For sure, it's a violation. Here's another trash container with a tiny light bulb, but it's still a violation. Another one, and these are like all different locations. This is to show you how frequently we see this, and you see the green tip ones and not green tip ones, all kinds of stuff. Okay, remember what I told you guys about the wording that has to go on a universal waste for a lamp? It has to be universal waste lamp, or used lamp. What do we see here? Fluorescent bulb. Didn't I tell you? See, I cannot make this up even if I wanted to. And this audit was done in 2017. So they have to get rid of it within a year. Well, this doesn't seem like it's happened. So that's another violation, right? Okay, here's another one. Empty aerosol cans, universal waste. So they have the date. Well, the date is late, so comparing to 2017, because this is 2004. Universal waste batteries. So here, okay, the wording is correct, but it's uncovered. The accumulation begin date is too late. And here, aerosol cans in that state, in this place, were not authorized universal waste streams at that time. So if they're completely empty, then you can always, recycle it as scrap metal. But if there is some residual in it, then that will be hazardous waste, So I guess it's wrong and inadequately stored at different levels, I guess. Here's another one. You see some ladders here. And people got creative, and then it's a good location, I guess, if you think about it. If only they kind of covered them and put the proper label, I would have no problem with it. Well, that's not the case, unfortunately. Here's another one. Well, look at it, universal waste lamps. That's correct wording. And no accumulation begin date, unless they have another way of showing when they first started accumulating lamps in this box, then that's a violation. It's not completely covered either. Here's another one. Two of them are kind of coming out of the box. That's not a good idea. This is just to show you the whole box is the same picture, basically. The label was adequate. It's just, it cannot be coming out just like that. Some more by paint containers there. Okay, so this was it for the universal waste inspection. And if you want to go check out, I have 2 resources for you for universal waste state regulations. It's always a good idea to go and check them out. So, because some states might be different, I want to show them to you real quickly. So, EPA has a site where you can go check state universal waste programs in the U.S. And it's going to tell you why is it different for some states, and whichever state you want to go to, you can click here, and then it'll tell you who adopted the rule, who is authorized, which state is authorized to use the rule, or they have their own rules, etc. And there's another site I want to show you, which is extremely useful, not just for universal waste, but for any other environmental program that if you want to look it up, especially at a state level. This is a environmental compliance assistance platform. It's not regulatory, but it was funded by the EPA, and it's referenced from the EPA's website also. So you see here state regulations information locator. So they have it like different environmental programs here, and you can click in one of them. Let's say you clicked on universal waste, it will show you the entire country, and you can pick a say let's pick Montana, and it'll give you a summary of what's going on in Montana. Like here, if you can see, apparently Montana is using the federal regulations, and there are links you can go check it out. And this is the same basically for all kinds of environmental programs. So it's a really good website. Okay, let's do a stormwater inspection now. So for stormwater inspection, a facility either is exempt, which is really rare. Manufacturing sites usually are not. Either they have a stormwater permit, which was required to have a stormwater plan, or they don't need to have the permit, but they have the stormwater no exposure certification. If there's no exposure, nothing can be stored uncovered, okay? This is just in a nutshell. Okay, so this is a trash dumpster. Well, this is not a good idea, whether you have a permit or not. I mean, this is, remember I told you the permit is not to allow you to pollute the environment. So this is not an acceptable dumpster condition in any way. This is another dumpster. And you can see if it was just like, say, just metals there, and metals that are not contaminated with any chemical or oil or anything to that sort, then sure, keep it uncovered. But, as you can see here, it's a bunch of stuff in there. And especially if there's a no exposure in place, that's not acceptable. Here's a trash container. All kinds of exciting stuff. The things you see at a site inspection, it's, anything and everything I can say. Okay, I talked about transformers. So this is a transformer, and remember I said look at the near vicinity. Check out this dark area, and look, they put some spill material here too. That means it's leaking. So look at this. It's all soaked. So you can't leave this just like that. Obviously, something's leaking, something's happening. It has to be fixed for sure. Well, this is not so bad, I guess. We can live with this one, I'm thinking. There are some wood pallets here, as long as they're not contaminated. Sure, they can be stored outside. Here's another good picture. This is the external grounds of a manufacturing site. Some cars, and everything looks in order. Nothing is exposed. That's acceptable. Here's another way of covering your trash. There's like a trash and recycling here, and they cover it on top to kind of prevent any potential contamination to the water. Well, this is not obviously, especially if there's a no exposure situation in place. You don't want to leave debris and all that good stuff here dirty. God knows what's going on. And this is not acceptable either. You see the trash pile here, and yeah. This is one of my favorite pictures. It's like, the containers, God forbid, they're deteriorated, who knows what comes out of it, and some production material, they kind of look contaminated too. So it's not adequate to store this outside of your facility. Another dumpster, it seems to be a metal, scrap metal. Like I said, it could be okay as long as there is no contaminants in it. So it's like stormwater rules are kind of common sense. So you think about it, when it rains or snows or something like that happens, when it touches one of those materials outside stored, is it gonna pollute the water environment or not? As simple as that, right? So if you have oil contamination and this thing leaks, yes, of course it will. That's why you have to take the necessary precautions. Here's another one. Too many things are going on. They got to clean up over here too. That's not an acceptable condition in terms of housekeeping also. This is a pretty good look. If you store things underneath, that's totally fine. No problem here. This is storm drain. Some vegetation is coming out. Not a good idea. And some stuff around it. You always want to keep the storm drains clean and make sure there's no oil sheen and all that good stuff. Once the water is contaminated with oil, it's very difficult to clean it after that, especially if it reaches the groundwater. Another storm drain, which is clogged and it was supposed to be active, so you want to clean that up. This is not a good idea. And some soaked oil-looking contamination nearby, which is a red flag for sure. Here's another one. I mean, this one looks just fine. Obviously, there is some kind of fuel or some chemical situation going on here. There will be loading, unloading activity. As long as it's done, this valve is kind of inside of this secondary containment structure, you should be okay, and preferably with some spill kits nearby and not doing the loading and unloading activity during a storm event. That would be the best practice. This is another favorite of mine. Again, I think somebody got creative with this. Not sure what's going on, some kind of fuel operation going on, but yeah, this is not adequate at all. Here's a good one. This is a trash dumpster. As long as you cover the top, you're fine. You don't have to cover all the sides. So this is an acceptable storage. This is not, because again, there's too much debris and housekeeping is not maintained properly. This is the roof of a facility where you see those little pelletized things. Clearly, either a filter is down or something is not working the way they're supposed to, because these things are not supposed to come out. So it should be further investigated. Okay, and these are the stormwater resources for you if you wanted to further look at it. Just some state examples too. And you can see the links there. And for our here's another one. For our last inspection. Now, this one is multimedia inspection, not just stormwater or universal waste. Let's look at everything. Let's just see what we have here. Okay, so we have a paint thinner waste container. Usually paint thinners are hazardous waste, and there's a certain way of labeling hazardous waste. So the most important, it has to be labeled as hazardous waste. So this doesn't say that, and it's not a good idea. And it's kind of grounded, so that makes me think it's flammable. Once it's flammable, it's hazardous, so not a good idea. Non-hazardous items, it says, and this was I believe, hazardous waste and improperly stored, so it's not adequate. Beautiful storm drain. See, you can see the oil sheen right next to it, and so much dirt, so much. Yeah, this is like really very a big violation. Actually, got to be careful with this one. This is a container. Usually, usually facilities have these types of containers to store aerosol cans, whether punctured or not. But again, they have to clarify whether it's hazardous waste or it's just scrap metal. If it's hazardous, then they have to keep this covered too. There's like, they can put a metal lid on it. So this is not adequate. Here's another one, just to lamps stored inadequately. This one, so many things are happening here, depending on what they're storing and if they're covered or not. It may or may not be okay, but excuse me. So many things happening. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem adequate. Let's see. Here's a again, a storage area. People got creative and to dump the universal waste lamps. That's a violation of storage for that. Hazardous waste, that's where the label is not complete and also it's not properly covered. It should be really sealed. Well, this one seems okay. It's covered and containers seem in good condition based on what we see here. So this is acceptable. Remember I was talking about under the counter hazardous waste satellite accumulation. This is a lab and this is just the hazardous waste that comes from an equipment here, but it's not labeled properly. So this would be a violation. A trash can in a paint booth. You see, this is a solvent. This is thinner that is hazardous waste. So you cannot just throw this in here and there is more here. This is definitely a violation of hazardous waste regulations. Another one for aerosol cans, no label and the lid is open. And there goes our inspection. Well, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me with any questions or comments. Here's my contact info. You can always go to greenupacademy.com and check us out there also. Other than that, it's been a pleasure to talk about these things with you guys today. And thank you so much, Exemplar, for this opportunity. Back to you, Mike.
And thank you, Mel DeGregorio, for your insights into conducting effective environmental site inspections. And that concludes this presentation.